Hi, everyone. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. We've noticed that some people have been having an issue with joining us through the link on Facebook. So we'll just give it another 2 minutes or so, and then we'll get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 6th event in our series titled Amplifying BIPOC Voices in Sustainability, hosted by interns at the UW-Madison Office of Sustainability. Once again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. The theme of tonight's event and panel is Reinvestment after Divestment. And we at the Office of Sustainability want to acknowledge the lack of diversity both within our team and our office, which is almost entirely white. This reflects a larger trend across campus and in mainstream environmentalism in which the necessary and valuable voices of BIPOC, who have long led the fight to protect our community's environment, are excluded. We've created this series in an effort to recenter these voices within our own campus community. Also, in addition, we believe that it is important to acknowledge that sustainability is not just about the environment, but it is also inevitably tied to social and economic factors and influences. We hope this series will help to illuminate those facets of sustainability. Also, again, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the land that we, or at least I am currently on. I'm currently in the Madison area, which was and is Ho-Chunk land that was forcibly taken. I think it's important to acknowledge the land we are on because I'm a settler, and growing up, I was never taught or I never knew whose land I was on, and it was never really talked about. Also, as we are hosting this event to amplify BIPOC voices, it is important to acknowledge the Indigenous land that we are on and the past and current oppression that Indigenous people face. If you're joining us from elsewhere outside of the Madison area, I encourage you to look up and educate yourself about whose land you are currently on. I would highly suggest the resource native-land.ca online. All right, so for today's panel, we have 3 guest speakers, Kai Brito, Bianca Gomez, and Professor Grace Bulltail. Each panelist will present for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we will allow for questions from the audience. Feel free to message any questions that you have to Hannah Franz, who is listed as a moderator in the chat.
To begin, we will have Kai. Kai coordinates the naturally occurring and affordable housing NOAA projects at Sustain Dane. He is also a video producer and content creator with a passion for sustainability. His personal experiences with poverty and race drew him to the affordable housing sector, an area where improving sustainability metrics can improve both financial well-being and personal health. That is why he holds dual roles as a housing advocate and media personnel, to help tell the stories of the most vulnerable people who are fighting for our planet. Kai graduated from UW-Madison with a degree in environmental science, geospatial focus. Kai, you should be able to share your screen right now. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Oh, not quite. And now, let's set this up. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep, beautiful.
Okay, perfect. So let's get started. What I work on is naturally occurring affordable housing, but the program is actually called Efficiency Opportunities Navigator Program. This is just a recap of our pilot program that we ran in 2020 and what we plan to do and accomplish in 2021. I work with Sustain Dane, and partner with us for this program is Elevate. So let's just start. What is this whole Navigator program we're talking about? So this program works with naturally occurring affordable housing, but this is in the small to medium-sized realm. And this is for multifamily housing to become more efficient and resilient while reducing operating costs to residents and keeping it affordable. So the key thing here to keep in mind is small to medium size. What we mostly work with is duplexes and maybe units like up to 50 building units. We're not working with places like the Hub or an Embassy, anything like that. We're just working with the units that are in between that typically get forgotten from that sort of conversation about making it affordable and resilient for climate change. So what's eligible for our program is at the 80% area median income level. And a lot of the federal programs that work at the state and federal level, those operate at 60%. So that's where you'll get things like weatherization, like insulation to your homes. But we operate up to the 80% to give a little more room for the types of homes that will be eligible for the work that we're going to do. It's important that the program focuses on renter occupied because there's single family programs, there's a state energy program for that. But with renter occupied, we're working with people that don't typically own their own homes, right? So you don't really have the control to make your home energy efficient, to make the improvements that you want to make. So that's why we're focusing on that for our program. And as we'll get later on to the slides, there's 40,000 eligible units in Dane County. And so these are the types of homes that we have to work with just in this area. Think about, beyond in Wisconsin and also all other 49 states. So here's the need, housing resilience. We have an affordable housing shortage here in Dane County. This is why we're focusing on existing buildings and making retrofits and renovations to the buildings that are already here. Those the homes are not as well taken care of as the new constructions that come out. And those are the ones that get prioritized for energy efficiencies. Not that it's bad that they're doing that, but we really need to focus on what's existing instead of tearing down and making all these more expensive homes more and more. We don't want all that. Equity too, research shows that for working families, rent, utilities, and transportation costs are among the highest in monthly expenses. We want to ask the question, who are these homes affordable? Affordable for whom? Some people might be able to afford a $2,000 one-bedroom house, but that's not for everyone. I mean, I don't even live in that, so but we're working with that. So we work with that to make homes at the affordable level so that when people live here, they can actually go out there and eventually, make their own home purchase, because that's what we're trying to work towards. For climate change, affordable housing consumes on average 33% more energy than market rate housing because it's generally older, not upgraded, or has deferred maintenance. And this is some of the areas we work with. I mean, I have this LED light bulb here, and these are some of the things, basic fixes that we can make to home, working with LED lights, working with water efficiencies like showers, shower heads and faucet heads, working with like pipe insulation, just general air sealing, and obviously the golden standard now, like the solar, that's what we really like to look forward to, but it's not always possible everywhere, but that is a goal that we strive for. And then access, like I said, these renter controlled homes, the renter doesn't have control over whether or not they can put in all these like light bulbs and shower heads or even solar. That's up to working with the building owners. And that's the kind of work that we do, getting the building owners to make these sorts of changes in their own households that bring down the utility bills, because renters pay their own utility bills. So if we can bring down the energy burden on the household, then that brings down the utility bills as well. So next slide, these are the areas that we focus on here. As you'll see in this map here, this comes from the US Census Bureau, the American Family Community Survey. And all the green areas, those are the locations that are census tracts within Dane County that have over 50% of the population is under 80% AMI, so area median income, meaning that these are some target areas where the stock would match the income levels of the residents living there. So these are areas where primarily we would target our focuses. Obviously, if there's a household that meets affordable housing income, the requirements that we have, we would still include them, but these are the areas that we're looking at. We're also making sure that we try and work with areas that have majority residents of color in the area. So BIPOC populations, and and we're working to make sure that those sorts of houses are included when we make the renovations and work with the owners in those areas. And this is just the Dane County housing stock. You'll see here, like looking at the single family. So it's just over, like right around the 60% threshold. Like most of the homes here are the single family, attached and detached. So attached meaning that they're just kind of touching each other. Detached is like, oh, there's a plot of land and like fences and a yard, things like that. But you look and see, like, these are all the homes, like 10, 16, 22, 32. 40% of the homes are multifamily, and that's a lot of people that don't own their homes. So we're affecting all these residents when we're working and looking at these multifamily stocks. That's 230,000 units of housing in Dane County. And as we're looking at here, we just look at the unsubsidized affordable, because we're not working with subsidized affordable. That's like the Department, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and working with some other programs. They're kind of covered under that, but we're getting the things that are not, like they're not included under those programs, because those are the ones that don't have access to the funding. So that's why we try and go and get the multifamily owners and make sure that they can, get the access to the funds they need to make the changes they need in the homes and affect the residents downwind from there. So as you'll see, the number starts increasing as you go further down for all the yellow bars. So those are the types of residents that we're affecting. And in our program, this is what we've accomplished in 2020. So we actually talked to a lot of the owners, building owners, and identify what are the barriers that are not allowing them to make these changes for their residents. A lot of it ends up being, the initial costs. It does cost money to do these things, but that's where we come in with some of the program offerings that we have access through state funding, and we just kind of tell them that these things exist so they can go ahead and make these changes and put some of the work in, and maybe some of their own funds into it too if they're interested. We talked with a multi-jurisdictional stakeholder group. That just means that we talked to a lot of different people and made sure that they knew exactly what we're doing, and kind of bounce some ideas off of them to make sure that we can make this the most effective as possible. So talking to people like water utilities, energy like electricity and gas offerings through those sorts of utilities, and these are the people that help us make this program really effective. We completed energy assessments, so we go into homes and we identify what are their appliances and see, okay, what's the energy budget of this household, and what recommendations can we offer to, make some of those conservation changes and reduce the utility bills, reduce the energy burden from that home and on the local grid. So that was 8 multifamily buildings and 5 single-family homes. And one of the more interesting things, this is the Residency Resiliency Program. And you can think of that as like local UBI, Universal Basic Income. We took 17 residents and we worked not only just to provide them $600 over a time period of 3 months, but we worked on them with financial education courses. How do you begin to budget? How do you begin to save money? What do you need to prioritize? Here's how you begin to actually start the conversation of, once you have the money, you get all your debts paid off. Here's how you begin to invest, because all these people, like how many Americans are not invested? I think it's something like less than 50% of Americans are even invested in the stock market. Now we're bringing this conversation to them. You don't need to be the ultra rich to invest. You can start really small, and that can make a big impact, and that can start changing the ideas and ways you think about money. So it's beyond just giving the money. It's also teaching them how to think about money, and they're free to do with it what they will after that. So that's what I love about the Residency Resiliency Program. And many of the people that qualified for the program ended up being single family mothers, or single parent households. So I thought that was really impactful work that we got there. And then the Energy and Water Opportunities Navigator, which we now call the Efficiency Navigator, name changes throughout there. But that's just to make sure that we can help people streamline the process, because it's quite a lengthy process to apply for all the free incentives out there, but it does make things possible if you can get them for free, and the owners really like that. So we're just the middle people that help negotiate and get those sorts of materials like light bulbs and power strips and thermostats to all the building owners so they can install and help their residents save money on the utilities. Some more that we got here, typically on households, we save about 10 to 20% energy and water savings. And that's about like over 30,000 miles driven by an average passenger vehicle. So that's really cool. And we've actually been working with solar opportunities too. So that's something that we always look forward to. We're trying to solarize the grid, and that's renewable energy resource right there. 15 energy and water measures that we tell people, here's how you can save a little more money, and some of that's upgrading boilers. So all the things that you'll get to be used to having when you own your own house or own buildings. So those are the things we look at. And then we also work with Focus on Energy, the state's energy rebate and retrofit program, to distribute those materials. And here are the barriers that we see through our program design. A lot of it's just that people don't know, or the owners don't know about the offerings through these programs, or they don't have the funds for it, or they don't go out in their way to look at it either. So largely what my role is education and outreach. who are these building owners and how do we get them to learn about these incentives offerings? Because there's a lot of free stuff out there, free money, free time that's given out there, but they're not connected to it. So once we get connected to them to it, it kind of is a no-brainer to, work on these things for your households. I mean, who doesn't, as a renter, want to hear that you'd be paying less money in utility bills each month, saving about $100 to $200 each year on utility bills. I mean, that's just a win-win-win when you can get it for free to these building owners if they just have to fill out a little paperwork that we help facilitate. So that's something that people have been learning about, and the word's spreading, and we're starting to get more homes on the upgrade queue. And as you'll see here, we're not only just relegated to Dane County. We're across the nations. California, Texas, Georgia. There's other areas. Minnesota is kind of like our ambition to move towards. States really moving really well in the direction of NOAA housing, and hopefully we can get Wisconsin, to caught up on some of our programs. But I think it's a really good start what we got going here with Dane County. But here's some of the other areas that we look towards and collaborate with and learn from as we implement some of their policies and strategies for making this NOAA housing actually possible and improved within our own communities. So for our key performance indicators, we're looking to, directly outreach to about 5,000 owners just this year, or 5,000 like impact total, but then really, get to know like the 50 owners. We already have 3 community organizations that we partner with, Latino Academy of Dane County. I think we have some other ones, maybe I'm not allowed to say, but we are partnering with our community to make sure that, it's a community-led effort. We don't want to just be this kind of like stagnant nonprofit, not knowing who the people are, or just kind of, getting the homes. It's really about the people living in the homes, and that's who we want to make the impact for. And we're still working on assessing some units this year. And we'll see where we're at by the end of the year, but we're going pretty steady, and hopefully we can continue the work that we're doing. So this is the idea of how our Navigator process works. And we just really work on the outreach phase, and and then we give them a sheet about what sorts of energy efficiency and conservation upgrades they can make to their own homes. Then we work with the contractors, trying, okay, here's how you get the work done. A lot of people can't install their own boiler, so we have to get people connected to contractors to do that for them. And we work with getting the incentives so that it's subsidized through state energy program or some other means where it doesn't cost so much for the owners to go through and make those improvements for energy efficiency and for lower utility bills. Then we actually get the things installed, and then we're done with the project. And these are some of the people that are involved with that. Obviously, throughout the whole process, we work with the property owner. We bring in our own energy engineer through Elevate. We have our navigator at Sustain Dane, and the community partner helps us with the outreach, and contractors kind of help us bring it to the end. So this is just showcases the whole step from start to finish and all the different people that are involved and how we bring them all together to get these things sorted out and accomplished. And this is just an idea of, here's what we might give to a building owner as ideas for them to upgrade now, 1 to 2 years in the future, or maybe 2+ years. So like right now, maybe we want them to work with air sealing at the rim joist, just at the base of the house between the basement and where the floorboards are. So like that's something we want to start now. Maybe we can just get those LED light bulbs for free through state's Focus on Energy program. Basic fixes that they can really install right now and get the most on energy savings. Then we might include things like insulation on their piping, and then non-programmable thermostats. Like that's like a future thing. Upgrading the boiler, that's a future thing. Hopefully we can get talks on solar. But even if they just take the first part, upgrade now, those are the easiest big lift things that will actually save quite a bit of energy. So even if they don't go all the way through with us to commit on solar, at least we did get some energy savings on there. So I think it's a good place to start, and hopefully they'll think about us later, and then they can come get solar later on. That's our fingers crossed hopes for that. So it's always good to think about the future and just beyond just like what they do in the moment, because they can always change their minds, or maybe they have funding later. So that's something we always like to just kind of keep in the background for them. And this is kind of our philosophy of how we work on our energy incentive packages. So the first thing is basic stuff: light bulbs, aerators and shower heads for your sinks, power strips, things like that. The second package, like, we can help you get your refrigerator replaced if it happens to be. Most owners don't replace things like refrigerators unless it's coming to the end of life. So we can help you make choices on the most energy efficient brands and things like thermostats like that too. For the third one, central heating and cooling, that's really big. The boilers, like I mentioned. And the fourth one, it's really nice if we can get solar or an air source heat pump, because those energy savings are just really big, and throughout the year and many years over, it saves so much energy if you have that in there. And it actually affects all the units, not just one unit. If you get one person install a light bulb in one unit, that's great. But if this is something like solar, that affects all the units in a building that has like 50 plus units. That's really great. And now we know that they're getting the energies from it. And just back to the resiliency program, I forgot this later on down the line, but yeah, I kind of went through it, and we offer the financial education classes. And this is actually a collaboration with Old National Bank, and our partner Elevate had the seed money to start this. So these are things that we're really looking at. We're really looking to make this a mainstay, and given the funding opportunity, hopefully we can allow this program to keep running and offer those financial education classes, because all the people that went through the class found a lot of value from it, not just getting the money, which is really helpful for people during the time of COVID, but also learning about how to think about money, because it's not something that, I wasn't taught this. I mean, I figured it out myself after going to college and, being in these sorts of environments. But having these, sorts of classes where you can talk with your neighbors that live in the same households about it with you, and like a non-judgmental space, it's really nice to have that opportunity, because money isn't something that people usually talk openly about, but this gives people the opportunity to do that and learn along the way, and realize that nobody's perfect here, but we're all just trying to be a little bit better. So that's why I'm really a big fan of our resiliency program. Here's some of the things that we're looking forward to doing in the next year, getting more partners, grant opportunities, working with more diverse contractors in Dane County. And we're actually partnered, recently announced through the city of Madison. The mayor had a press conference about her climate forward agenda, and will be included upon upgrading some of the existing buildings here in Madison and beyond Dane County. But for the city of Madison, obviously just Madison area, the kind of work that we'll be doing and working with those building owners to get those upgrades, see the energy savings, and help the residents save some money along the way. So this is what we're really looking forward to. And that's all for my presentation. We've got a lot of the people to go through. So thank you very much, everyone. I will stop my share.
Thank you so much, Kai. If anyone has any questions for Kai, please feel free to send them to Hannah Franz in the chat or in the Q&A section. Our next panelist is Bianca Gomez. Bianca is the Youth Justice Director at Freedom Inc. She's also one of the founders of the BLAC Liberation Action Coalition, a coalition between students and community members in Madison who share concerns about issues and policies facing their campus and community. After graduating with a degree in special education at the University of Akron in Ohio, Bianca moved to Madison to pursue a master's in Afro-American Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Her research focuses on alternatives to punitive disciplinary policies and practices, which disproportionately impact youth of color, especially in schools and other institutions. Bianca is unapologetically dedicated to Black liberation and the liberation of all oppressed groups. She believes in shifting power to the most impacted communities and looks to her ancestors for support and guidance as she engages in the struggle for freedom. Bianca, please take it away. Sorry, you're muted.
Can y'all hear me? Okay, my internet has been acting the fool today, so I just want to make sure. That's such an old bio. I'm like, we have an intern actually updating our website, but all those things are true. It's just not reflective of the work that I'm currently doing at Freedom Inc. So I don't know how many of you all are familiar with Freedom Inc. and what we do, but we're actually a Black and Southeast Asian liberation organization that does work around ending violence, specifically to women, queer folks, and children. We see that violence as a multitude of things. We see that violence as domestic violence and sexual assault. We see that violence as police violence, which most people know us for our police abolition work. But we also do, again, domestic violence and sexual assault services. We do political education for about 20 different programs across the spectrum of age, gender, sexuality, all of the intersect. We also see violence as environmental oppression. We see violence, we see things as housing and food, and the fact that people don't have those resources as a violent system, right? Because there are enough resources to make sure that everyone on this land is taken care of. But we choose to hoard resources for the rich. We choose to hoard resources for white folks. We choose to hoard resources for the people who need it the least instead of the people who need it the most. So whenever I talk about environmental justice or climate justice, I always ask folks to reframe it and talk about environmental oppression, right? Because justice for who? A lot of our folks don't have access to the things that Kai just talked about, that his program or organization are trying to provide, expand resources for. And, things like housing, food, healthcare, we see those things as a human right and should just simply be free, right? People should not have to pay for housing. People should not have to pay for quality food. People should not have to pay for quality healthcare, and people should not have to pay for safety. And we often run into situations where folks are not given those resources, and we do advocacy, community organizing, leadership development, and direct services around the lack of resources that people get and experience. So I can talk a little bit about some of the things that are environmental issues, examples of. Sorry, let me turn my phone on silent. My grandma's calling me. We can talk about things that are environmental issues that directly impact Black communities, which is, the thing that I most focus on, Black communities and Black children, and some of the ways that we have pushed back over the years, some of the examples of our organizing and political campaigns. So we all know, hopefully I'm already preaching to the choir, and folks already know about the Flint water crisis, but Black children literally dying in Flint as a result of a governmental decision to withhold resources, to go for a cheaper option of water and not upgrade or update their services. So I do think, individual landlords or individual homeowners, individual people may not have the resources to make improvements, life-saving improvements, do not have the resources to get lead out of their home or change the water system. But there are also companies, organizations, and high-powered individuals who knowingly poison water in Black and Brown communities, who knowingly open power plants and open toxic waste dumps and strategically place them in Black communities, because nobody's gonna care, nobody's gonna notice, there has to be an uproar, an uprising, or years of community organizing in order for people to care. And we get minimal reform, we get minimal attention, minimal effort around around these toxic power plants, chemical waste dumps, factories, all of those things that are strategically placed in poor Black and Brown communities. We can also, talk about just the working conditions of and who's employed there, right? The Koch brothers are not sitting in that factory, getting all types of lung diseases, all types of skin diseases, all types of cancers. No, it's poor Black and Brown folks who are forced to work in those poor conditions that impact their health, that impact their family's health. We can also talk about, Hurricane Katrina, again, which was a man-made disaster. And we think about Katrina economically, we think about Katrina socially, but we also have to think about Katrina as it pertains to environmental oppression. Because again, that disaster, rebuilt up white communities real quick. I went to New Orleans a few years after Katrina, and we went to the French Quarters. You wouldn't even know nothing happened there. But when we went to poor Black communities, even the last time I went to New Orleans was in 2019 or 2019. And even however many years later, those communities are still not rebuilt. Those communities are still suffering the environmental impact of Hurricane Katrina with no resource and no resources and no investment. We can also talk about, reproductive justice and the impact that living in toxic environments has on Black women's bodies, who are most likely to face health concerns, the birth defects, and the infant mortality rate of Black women across class is the worst in the world, actually, for Black women in the United States. And a lot of that is connected to the environmental oppression, the toxic waste that are placed in our communities, and also the environmental impacts of living in homes that have not been renovated, that have lead, that have asbestos, that have all these things. And obviously that also has an impact on the health of Black children and the Black community as a whole. And then we can talk, food deserts are an environmental justice issue, a strategic environmental oppression decision made by folks in power. And the amount, so I work in one particular community in Madison that has no food access outside of a gas station for at least a 10-mile radius. And it was a strategic decision to put Black folks in that community, to put Black folks there. And I want us to remember that this is not an individual choice. This is not a personal choice. This is not something that an individual can take responsibility for. This is a systematic decision to oppress people, and environmental oppression is just one of the many ways that our communities are impacted by white supremacy, anti-Blackness, patriarchy, capitalism, all of those things. And speaking of capitalism, because I think it's we have to make the connection between environmental oppression and capitalism, that capitalism is the driving force behind obviously economic oppression, but the driving force behind environmental oppression. It is the companies, the individuals, the government, they benefit financially from toxic waste. They benefit financially from gentrification, which is another form of environmental oppression and environmental injustice. And they make billions of dollars off of that, right? So they are not going to stop. What they want is to have the least amount of pushback, the least amount of concern, right? So how do you do that? You put those harmful chemicals, you use the cheapest, lowest quality products in places where people are going to care the least. And like I said, we already know, again, probably preaching to the choir, this is my first time meeting you all, that is poor Black and brown communities. Even when you look at the quality of products in a Target or a Pottery Barn versus a Walmart or a, well, Walmart is probably, you know, just as toxic as Target, but a Dollar Tree, right? Numerous studies have come out urging parents not to buy toys, bottles, plastics, glass, measuring cups, everything. Please don't buy those things from Dollar Tree or any of the cheaper stores. But what choice do poor Black and brown communities have? They actually don't. They can't afford to buy a stainless steel, you know, cookware set from Target or, you know, one of the higher end stores. They actually cannot afford that. They don't have a choice but to go to Dollar Tree. But poor Black and brown communities are again blamed through a neoliberal capitalist model of blaming the individual instead of blaming the system that created the conditions where people have no other choice but to move into a lead filled or asbestos filled apartment because they need housing for them and their kids, right? But then Black parents are blamed for not being able to take care of their children with asthma, not being able to take their children to doctor's appointments, not being able to provide nutritious meals to their families. Again, instead of a system that created the conditions. Angela Davis, I don't know how many of you are familiar with her or her work, but she also talks a lot about how environmental injustice, environmental oppression, the climate crisis is a feminist issue. And again, Freedom Inc., we're a feminist organization. So that is so important to our work that we are centering women, queer folks, and girls around this issue of environmental justice, because we carry that weight on our backs a lot. So some of the things that Freedom Inc. has done in the past, I think historically we never like saw our work as environmental justice or climate justice, but more recently we have. And so I'll talk about some of the work that we're doing locally, and then I'll talk about some of the work that we are doing nationally. Sorry, I lost my list. So I also just had surgery on my eyes, actually, so I'm trying to focus. Yeah, so we petitioned the city or organized or demanded that the city, and this is even before I joined Freedom Inc., to give us our own community gardens. This is before community gardens were popular. This is before, you know, everybody has a community garden now, which I'm so happy about. I live in Eagle Heights, so most of the people here have their own little plot of land and share land. Freedom Inc. has about 2 or 3 gardens around the city that we specifically give, you know, to our elders, our Black and Southeast Asian elders. But before that happened, we had to demand it from the city. So we use the gardens in Bayview, we use the gardens at Badger Rock. We have a few other community gardens around the city, again, which we specifically give to our elders or let our elders take over that space. But the city would not, basically they wouldn't do it. So we would plant food and crops just in the middle of a medium, right? We would just find a place, a free plot of land where we considered free. The city said that they owned it. I'm like, we own it. And plant food and plant things that our people needed. And the city actually poisoned it. They cut it down, which we saw as a direct threat to our people, right? Because we are trying to provide resources. We're trying to because of the housing crisis. And oftentimes when we think of that period, we think about middle-class people losing their homes, but poor Black people were also being evicted in such high numbers and not having anywhere to live. The shelters were packed. We were dealing with multiple oppressions at the same time, shelters being packed, anti-Blackness, losing our jobs, losing housing, losing food resources, losing government assistance because of the recession. So Freedom Inc. actually moved Black people into open housing, open homes, right? We moved Black people into homes that were vacant because we believe that housing is a human right. You should not have a vacant home and a person living on the street. That just doesn't add up with our politics and with our values, right? And we say our budgets are moral documents. So if we're allocating money to help middle-class white folks save their home, save their property, we should also be allocating resources to make sure that every houseless person in this city has a place to live. Another thing that we have recently done is work on some environmental justice with our babies, our 5 to 10-year-olds in our Books and Breakfast program. It's a program that focuses on literacy and political education for elementary aged youth. It was modeled after the Black Panther Party's free breakfast program, again, which is a legacy of our environmental justice work, the Black Panther Party and all of the work that they did. So we actually learned about environmental justice and we had our young people organized around it. They wrote letters to BP, they wrote letters to the Koch brothers, they wrote letters to Walmart, and demanded that they become more environmentally efficient in their practices and stop their practices that currently harm poor Black and brown communities and communities of color. I think that's about it. I don't know how long I was talking for because I wasn't keeping track, but hopefully I touched on a little bit of everything.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Bianca. If anyone has questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we will get to them after our last but not least panelist, Dr. Grace Boltail. Dr. Boltail is an assistant professor at the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. She is affiliated with the Biological Systems Engineering Program and the Nelson Institute Center for Sustainability and the Global Environment. Dr. Boltail's research interests center on the intersections of land use and natural resources management in tribal communities, promoting capacity building and equity. Her research framework stresses that effective sovereignty is tied to overall resource management. Grace is also an advocate for Native American and Indigenous students as a STEM educator at the tribal, college, and university levels.
I hope you can see my screen.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you for that introduction, and I appreciated hearing from the other panelists. So as was mentioned, I'm an assistant professor at the Nelson Institute, and we just had our big Earth Day celebration last week. So I want to talk just briefly about some of the motivations for my work. I am originally from Montana. I'm from the Crow tribe where I'm enrolled, and I'm also a descendant of the 3 affiliated tribes, the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara, who are currently located in what is North Dakota. And both of my tribes are resource producing tribes, meaning that they extract natural resources from our homelands for a large portion of their revenues. So the The Crow tribe is located in the Powder River Basin, which is mostly in Wyoming and parts of Montana. And it supplies 40% of the domestic coal production. And the three affiliated tribes are located in the Bakken Formation, and they're a large oil producing tribe. So I include this graphic to show where tribal lands are located and in relation to coal mines and coal-fired power plants. So the Crow Reservation here has several mines adjacent to it, and it supplies a large amount of coal to the Midwest. A lot of our coal is sent by rail throughout the country. So one of the more recent developments with natural resource has been the leasing of a large amount of the coal resources, about 1.4 billion tons, to Cloud Peak Energy, which is now bankrupt and has changed to the Navajo Transitional Energy Company, which is owned by the Navajo Nation, the other coal producing tribe. And a majority of my work is looking at water resources, water scarcity, the lack of access to drinking water. These are pictures of various tribal nations that often have to go to water sources for drinking water and haul them over long distances. So that's very time consuming and resource consuming for people to do that. This tribal nation in Washington had a water shortage during the height of the pandemic last year, and had to have water brought in. So that's an ongoing issue for the majority of tribal nations who also have these vast resources. So I'm really interested in looking at what tribes can do to kind of change change that relationship. And one of them is really having resource control and environmental authority over their lands. So I did a project on wastewater from oil and gas, and I compared how those were regulated on tribal lands and federal lands. These are some of the sites on federal lands, and a lot of the same agencies oversee tribal lands, as they're both held in trust. So the EPA is definitely involved, and really has marginal environmental regulations in this process that I found. So this is a picture of some of the wastewater that is largely untreated and goes right into streams. This is on tribal land, and a lot of the water here is used by livestock. So you have your livestock grazing in this polluted water, and I'm really interested in how can tribes use their authority, and how can they be given that authority from the federal government to place better regulations, better permits, and some actual water quality standards to prevent this happening and to protect their waterways. And I found that these sites are largely located on tribal lands that are leased and then are still held, they're still held in ownership by the tribe. So what does that mean for, when these facilities are reclaimed, the tribes are still going to own them. And really the burden of remediating and dealing with this legacy energy resource extraction and mining will stay with the tribes. So another initiative that I'm involved in, that I'm very adamant about, is the connection of resource development to the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Oftentimes those two are linked. So this is a study from the Sovereign Bodies Institute helped release, and it shows the high incidence of this epidemic. So women and girls that go missing and have been murdered, largely on Indigenous, largely on tribal lands or very near them. And also the roots of these major power, major pipelines. So, you have TransCanada, you have Keystone XL, the Dakota Access Pipeline. Those go very near a lot of tribal land bases where this problem is prevalent. And then, you have figures in the government. This is the former Assistant Secretary of Interior, Brian Zinke, who was a congressman in Montana, and Mike Pence, and some of the tribal leadership that are out on horseback looking at the coal resources that are on the Crow tribe's land. And then you have those same officials with people like the Attorney General of Montana, who approve these pipelines and are also tasked with law enforcement. And really, all of these players could do more to protect, the vulnerable population, being Indigenous people, and particularly women and girls. And this is a picture of the last administration, who really only met with energy producing tribes. So you have them all seated here, trying to decide how to extract more resources from each of these tribes' land bases. So what I'm interested in doing is really promoting capacity building along with equity, to really give tribal land bases more power over their resources, and to really build in that sense of who should we include. Typically, women are left out of this role, but they have historically had a really important role, especially in things like being the caretakers of plants, seeds, in an effort to restore food sovereignty on tribal communities. That's an aim of a lot of the interventions. A lot of tribes regaining authority over their water resources is to be able to use them on their land. And I've recently received funding to start a working group that will focus on helping students at the university to to work with tribal communities. And the majority of the students will be from STEM fields. So, so to really support and promote their work, as you know, as graduate students, as undergraduate students, obtaining their degree, because often that support is lacking. So I'll end my comments there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Boltail, and all of our panelists. It was really great to hear all of the work that you're doing. I recognize that it's 8, so if anyone has to leave, I don't want to keep you too long, but we do have a couple of questions if people are able to stay. The first one being, how can institutions and individuals promote a just and equitable transition as we begin to reinvest in communities? And what are we most often missing from conversations on reinvestment?
Can I say something? Because that aligns with what I wrote in the chat. I forgot to talk about the national work from the Movement for Black Lives. There is a climate justice policy table. And they actually created the Red, Black, and Green New Deal, which is a climate justice policy that specifically focuses on Black communities. And I put a link to some resources in the chat. There are some really good webinars and some really good ways for folks to plug in.
Question, was it a question to all of us, or?
Yeah, if you want to answer, feel free to.
Could you repeat what the question was?
Yeah. So the question was, how can institutions and individuals promote a just and equitable transition as we begin to reinvest in communities? And what are we most often missing from conversations on reinvestment?
Right. Okay. So I'm hoping that the investment portion translates to finances, right? So like for me, especially when we look at, hey, City of Madison, you say you care about affordable housing. Well, let's prove it. Let's make that a portion of your budget. Let's put the money behind that, right? You can't just say that you care about it. You have to actually put forth the finances and the effort and the interest into it and the influence into it that you have with the city and its partners and all the people that help operate it, and the taxpayers and the businesses that are going to be affected by that, because ultimately this is going to be good. Like, we're reinvesting for the future, because this is going to impact us now. Sure, it's like it's an initial cost, yeah, but think about all the good it'll do for the future. Like City of Madison, we're going to have a really big population moving here. Like, we're already starting to see major increases in the amount of population. By the year 2050, it's like our population is going to double. I mean, not even 2050, probably like 2040, City of Madison population is going to double. Where are they all going to live? And are all the people going to live here going to be like just like super rich? Or are all the people that originally live here not going to be able to afford to be able to live here anymore? This is why we need to think about what's the housing stock now, and how do we keep it that way? Because my big concern is, like, we don't want to give money to a homeowner and have them just like, great, we improved our house, now we're going to charge all the residents there even more money because you gave us this money to make our house better. It's not about that. This is why we want to make our the funds that we provide to them, we want to make sure it affects the renter in a way where it'll reduce the cost of living for them. So that's why we really focus on utility bills, and City of Madison can focus on making some of those renovations, because if the building owners can't afford it, or if it doesn't affect them enough to try and make the quality of living in their buildings for the renters in there, well, then we have to make sure that they're getting it, because the renters don't have, it's like if you're paying in a low like cost of living rental building, you don't have the money to also make the repairs in this home that you don't even own. So that's why we need to really push the building owners to finance it. We really need to push the cities to make the funding available so we can do that. And that starts in the conversation about budget and finance.
Yeah, respond to the question as well. So I think we really need to consider what voices are we missing, and how do we make an intervention for that, and how do we build in equity. I often think about this as an educator. I just finished my course on environmental justice, and I could have set the class in many different communities, but I'm most familiar with Indigenous communities, so that's what the class was about. But I think we really need to think about including the most marginalized, the most diverse voices. From an education level, that often starts with the faculty. What are we doing to to have all of those ideas in all of the various communities included? So it often starts with really being intentional about promoting, valuing diversity, and often that will help with building equity.
Thank you. Okay, we can do one last question. How can we use reinvestment as an opportunity to promote community control or autonomy?
Yeah, I love that question. That's something that Freedom Inc. has been fighting for a very long time. And Black communities around the country have been fighting for community control. I think a lot of times people come into Black communities, even very well-intentioned, and want to educate us and tell us what we need to do in order to improve our lives. And some of that is necessary, right? I'm not an expert on environmental justice. I'm not an expert on all of the things I need to do to improve my home in order to be energy efficient, and contribute to climate crisis less. I'm not an expert on a lot of those things, but there's a difference between skill sharing and paternalism. And I think that's exactly what happened in Katrina. And that's exactly what's happening in Flint, Michigan right now, is there's a lot of paternalistic folks, well-intentioned white allies and programs and organizations coming into Black communities and trying to teach us what we need to do to save our lives. But nobody's going to be an expert about what it means to save a Black life or an Indigenous life or a Latinx life, like a Black organization, a Black community is going to be. So I think, again, sharing resources, but ultimately we need control. We need self-determination. We don't need any more white folks telling us what we need to do, or we don't need any more elected officials telling us what to do, because we've actually been trying that for 400 years now, and it has absolutely not worked out in our favor. So I really encourage the folks on this call, especially as people who I presume are going to be experts around the climate crisis and environmental justice, to come in knowing that you're going to have to take a back seat to whatever the community wants and whatever the community wants to prioritize. So your priority might be like, look, we need to get solar panels on all these homes, y'all, because, we want you to be more energy efficient. It's going to save you money. It's going to be better for the environment. And the community, like, we need some damn food right now. Like, that's cool, but our immediate need is food. And here's how you can help us and support us in doing that. And if you can't do that, then move out of the way and find someone else who can. But Black communities need self-determination and control over everything. The things specifically that Freedom Inc. are fighting for community control over right now are education and police. We need community control over all of the things that impact our lives, including the environmental pieces.
Thank you, Bianca. I don't know if Kai or Dr. Boltail, if you would like to add anything to that.
I'll just add that our residency resiliency program that we work with, that just provides I really like the idea, the base concept of universal base income, because that's essentially what we're doing. We're providing, a period of universal base income to families that are in need, that they can spend their money how they like, and then also offering ideas for how to reinvest that money into into themselves, and potentially start a business or start investing or start learning how to budget and save for other things. And I'd say that that's probably like the most direct way in which our program has helped people. In addition, we also give them the opportunity for, we also ask them once they're part of this program, hey, do you want power strips? Do you want, thermostats? Do you want light bulbs? If you're starting to get into the money idea, then you really start thinking about how all those different ways, like your costs and the amount of money that you start spending. So reduce your spending and increase your income. So those are some direct ways we help people through their funding. So yeah, not just energy efficiency, it goes beyond that. It's a really holistic approach, and trying to address the needs beyond just like, what you're paying, but also what you need immediately in the moment. And those are some ways we had address those issues as well. And I feel like that's a really good way to reinvest. And we've been seeing some of that at the national level with stimulus checks. So hopefully this is a program that we can continue, and other people see fit too, because it's starting to become, a really mainstream idea, and I hope to see more of it. So I'm really excited to see, where it goes.
Yeah, I'll add that community autonomy is extremely important, but also allowing the community to determine what's appropriate for them, because it's not, fixes are not one size fits all. It really depends on what the community decides and how they want to direct that. But also including, all the voices, like the youth are really invested in what happens in their community. And, if we're always promoting education as a solution to capacity building, we need to value their voice, and to equip them in the best way possible. Having those investments at tribal colleges, at colleges that are accessible for marginalized people, and really empowering them, because people from these communities are going to be the most invested in the solutions.
Thank you. Well, I believe in the interest of time, I think we're going to end it there, but I just want to give another big thank you to all our panelists for being willing to speak with us today. And thank you for all our attendees who are joining us tonight. We would also like to do a special shout out to the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies and Facilities Planning and Management, which are the two administrative homes for the Office of Sustainability. This is our last event of the semester, but we are excited to resume programming next year. Also, make sure to follow us on social media at SustainUW to stay up to date about future event themes and guest panelists. I hope you all have a great rest of your night, and make sure to take care of yourselves.
Can I say one more thing? I'm so sorry.
No,
I do want to shout out Urban Triage. They're a Black organization in Madison. They're recently starting their Urban Growers program, I believe it's called, where they're going to be teaching Black youth about gardening. I believe they're looking for allies and supporters to donate and share resources. So it's one tangible thing that you can do right now to get involved with the community.
Thank you. You said Urban Triage?
Yes, Urban Triage.
Perfect.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.